We begin with Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine.
1 week after starting their offensive, Russian forces have captured their first major city. Ukrainian officials say Russia captured the southern port city of Kherson. The move puts Russia one step closer to seizing the Black Sea coastline, effectively cutting off Ukraine from global shipping lanes. Meanwhile, Russian forces are moving closer to major cities from the north, east, and south. However, the Pentagon says Russia's advance on the capital city of Kyiv has stalled.
The Ukrainian government says air defenses struck down Russian missiles last night over Kyiv. CBS News foreign correspondent Charlie D'Agata and his crew captured one of the explosions after a live report.
What happened?
What the hell was that?
Whoa.
That was close.
We want to let you know that Charlie and his crew are okay, thankfully. The UN says more than 1 million people have fled the fighting, making it the fastest refugee exodus of this century. The UN also estimates an additional 1 million people remain displaced within Ukraine. CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini joins us with more from Poland now. Hi, Christina. So, as we just said, the UN is saying more than 2 million people have been displaced by Russia's invasion in an incredibly short time frame. Where are all these people going, and what can you tell us about those who are displaced but remain in Ukraine? What is happening to them?
Well, they're going west, right? Because north and east are no longer an option because it's either Russia or it's Belarus, which has essentially become a proxy state for Vladimir Putin. I've got some numbers for you. I think you're going to pull up a map. So there's 500,000 Ukrainians or people from Ukraine have fled here. We've got 139,000 in Hungary, 97,000 in Moldova, 72,000 in Slovakia, 50,000 in Romania, and other countries to follow. I mean, keep in mind, that's a big number considering the entire population of Ukraine is only about 44,000 people. A lot of them are coming here to Poland because that's where the major highways go. There's also a good support system here that's been set up fairly quickly, but we've seen similar receiving centers and support in other countries. We've also seen a groundswell of support from other nations here in Europe. We've talked to people from all over the continent who've driven here with their cars unprompted to just offer rides and offer any kind of help they can. I've also seen people going back into Ukraine, and people are doing that for different reasons. We've seen women going in to pick up family because Ukrainian men are not allowed to leave. They're not allowed to cross the border, so they can't bring people out. So we've seen women getting cars with EU tags that are allowed to cross back and forth and driving in to get their relatives. We've also seen Ukrainian men going back in to fight, and they all seem fairly resolute. I mean, I've asked a couple times, why are you doing this? Are you scared? Did you think about not doing this? And I always get some form of, no, this is our country. This is what we have to do. We're going to go fight for Ukraine. We talk a lot about refugees coming across the border, but we don't talk as much about internally displaced people. That's people who were living in Kyiv, who've moved south. That's people who are living on that coastline you just talked about, who are trying to move north. So it's a huge, not only an exodus, but a huge disruption of people within Ukraine. I talked to a woman who I worked with there years ago during Zelensky's election, who was moved out of Dnipro, which is closer to where the Russians are. She's in a city in western Ukraine now with family because she hopes it's safe. And she says her family is still there, but if it gets any worse, they're going to go that way as well.
Now, Christina, the U.S. has repeatedly said it will not commit troops to Ukraine. It does not want a war with Russia. At the same time, the U.S. is pouring military resources into Ukraine and holding joint military exercises with Poland near the border. Why?
Yeah, they are, and they have been, and they're not being real quiet about it either. The U.S. just announced that it was sending 300 more Javelins into Ukraine. Now, it won't say quite how they're getting there, and also it's all but 5 EU countries are also sending some form of military support. The U.S. has sent thousands of troops to bulk up NATO allies around the bordering area here, and other countries have said, you're seeing support from countries who don't normally send military support to other conflicts here in the EU. The other issue is the Ukrainians are asking for a no-fly zone, which is something we've heard from President Zelensky over and over again, because where they're really vulnerable is from the air. We're seeing these bombing raids on civilian houses, and they're asking, if the U.S. doesn't want to confront Russia directly, can you at least do a no-fly zone? And the problem, according to the White House, is there is a lot of room there for error. There is a lot of room there for, okay, how are you going to enforce the no-fly zone? If that means shooting down a Russian plane, that's direct confrontation between U.S. planes and Russian planes, and that's something the U.S. has said it doesn't want to do. It's not willing to start a direct conflict with Russia, but in the meantime, it's giving every kind of aid possible, and more is probably on the way to Ukraine, to Ukrainians, so that they can fight Russia with the bullets and rockets and supplies that they need. Now, the Ukrainians, I think, would argue it's not enough. It's never going to be enough, but it is important to say that we haven't seen European countries and the U.S. united in this kind of defense for a country like this, I don't think, in recent memory.
And Christina, those military exercises, is that a reminder that NATO countries will be protected if Russia were to look beyond the Ukraine, or is that just U.S. saber rattling?
I think it is. I mean, I'm surprised at how nervous people here in Poland have told me they are. I didn't know if it was because they were nervous about what it could do to their economy, if they were nervous about what the influx of refugees would do to their communities. And they said, no, Putin has an appetite, and they are concerned that it won't stop at the Ukrainian border. So this is a show of support to, bulk up and stand behind NATO allies to make sure that this violence doesn't bleed outside of Ukraine, although the ramifications of that certainly will be. And as you see more and more of these Ukrainian refugees going to places all over Europe, they're going to be taking their stories with them. And that's something the entire continent and the entire world is going to have to reckon with.
Christina Ruffini, you've been doing phenomenal work in Poland. Thanks for making a few minutes for us.